I'm joined now by Jon Lovett in the Crooked Studio. Jon, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me once again.
Having you at your studio.
Thanks for coming here to have me.
Yes, of course. Okay, so let's jump into this. We are in the aftermath of Matt Gaetz having withdrawn his nomination for Attorney General because there was no path forward for him. Was this a backfire for Trump in the sense that it showed that actually from the minority, Democrats could still have some influence over what Trump and the Republicans are doing moving forward?
I'd like to think so. I would say that it feels a little rose-colored to believe that A, this is because of Democrats, or B, that Trump has faced any kind of setback because of it. I think Trump feels pretty emboldened right now to the point where do I think he would be pleased if a bunch of his cabinet picks went down? But he took a flyer on Matt Gaetz. He, I think, probably from the jump was hearing that it may be tough to get through. He withdrew it, and now he gets to go for someone like Pam Bondi, who, by comparison, looks more palatable, but is just as much of a Trump stooge. So, no. And then in terms of who's responsible for Gaetz going down, there are reports that Gaetz had basically heard that Collins, Murkowski, John Curtis, who is the Mitt Romney replacement, and one other, it might have been, and McConnell, of course, were unmovable no's. Yeah. And that's the four, and that's that. Speaks to the importance of why it is so great that in a very difficult environment. Here's where I would credit Democrats. Jackie Rosen won. Tammy Baldwin won. That means that they just do not have that much flexibility in the Senate. In that group of four, I don't think it's the first or last time that we'll hear about them.
Do you think that this is a situation now where, because they don't have to expend their political capital on trying to fight back against a Matt Gaetz nomination, now they can use that political capital, these Republicans, I mean, that group of four at least, to push back against a Tulsi Gabbard, an RFK Jr., somebody like that, for example?
I hope so. There are each one of these other people would be unacceptable and obviously someone who couldn't be confirmed.
Right, in any previous administration, yeah.
Right, which is Gabbard worse? Is RFK Jr. worse? Is Pete Hegseth worse? Which is the one that should draw our fire? I don't know. I think you have to be honest about all of them. They all should be withdrawn. They all should be defeated. There should be enough Republicans. There are so many Senate Republicans whose names we do not remember because they have been hiding for the past couple of years, hoping nobody notices them, that the Trump evil eye doesn't come for them, that they don't get ensnared in becoming an enemy of the base, but who are privately people that don't like Trump and don't like the kinds of people he's putting forward. Will that matter? I don't know. I just think we don't yet know. But I think you have to, in this moment, especially in this kind of time in which we are getting the nominees, which are giving us a sense of how bad the next 4 years will be, but Trump is not yet president. I think we have to know that there are times where we may lose fights we should be able to win, or we would have won another era, while still fighting them as if we can win. We should just simply not give Republicans the gift of assuming these people will get through. We should be fighting RFK Jr. like, of course he should be withdrawn. Of course he should be defeated. Same for Tulsi Gabbard. Same for Pete Hegseth. Honestly, same for Linda fucking McMahon at the Department of Education, a person with no education experience. Lee Zeldin, whose only qualification seems to be someone Trump kind of likes and who denied the election. There was a time when the fact that, I mean, look, the putting a energy a fracking executive in charge of the Department of Energy. Now, do I think that that's somebody we can stop? Probably not. But is it a story we can tell about the actual, not just the drama and the insults and the chaos, but the actual impact of Trump's governing? I think that's a story we can tell. And you fight these fights, you try to win some, you lose some, but you start telling the story of the actual impact of Donald Trump being president.
Do you think that some of these unnamed Republican senators, these people who nobody knows, the not Josh Hawleys and Ted Cruz's, all those people, do you think that now that Donald Trump is entering what will be a lame duck presidency. He's not running for re-election again,
One
presumably. From our lips to God's ears, but that these people won't feel as encumbered by the prospect of another Trump term to be able to, I don't know, like exhibit some power? Or do you think they're going to continue along this line of just contracting every ounce of their power over to him, because when he says jump, they say how high?
I don't know.
I mean, it's almost like a fool's errand to ask if Republicans are going to finally stand up to Trump. We are almost a decade into this experiment, and thus far they haven't shown any willingness to do that.
No, for sure. But I think we have also learned over the last couple of years that there's like a backbone spectrum, right? There was a moment after the insurrection on January 6th where they all seemed to have genuine backbone. Quite briefly, Mitch McConnell included, Ted Cruz included, right? These people told the truth about what happened in the wake of the insurrection.
But for a mere fleeting moment.
And what a day it was.
Yeah.
But for example, Tulsi Gabbard. Do I think there are a lot of senators who do not want to assent to somebody as toxic as Tulsi Gabbard? Yes. Are they saying it publicly right now? Mostly no. But what are they doing privately, right? Are they trying to do anything privately? Now, that's pathetic, right? But that's, I think, what we're going to see. The other problem, right, is it's not just about Trump. So just, I think, mere hours before the Gaetz nomination is withdrawn, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, anybody that opposes Matt Gaetz, we're going to release all our files on you. She actually said something that was shockingly well written for her. She said, if we're going to dance, let's dance in the sunlight. Yeah. Like, Marjorie.
you were like
threatening us with a good time here. But and then you had a Trump advisor saying to, I believe, John Carl at ABC, it's pretty simple. I'm paraphrasing. It's pretty simple. If you oppose Gaetz, you'll get a primary. Elon will fund it.
Yeah.
Just brazen corruption.
Right.
We got a billionaire. That billionaire will level you if you don't do what we ask. That is a threat that exists even if Donald Trump is a lame duck. Like, these are people that are now worried about the version of the Republican Party that Donald Trump is both a symptom of and a cause of. And so whatever happens with him, that radicalized base and the people around him that view it as a tool to their ends is going to continue. Now, does that mean they're going to go along with everything? No, I think we've seen, like we're starting to see the shape of what it looks like, right? Gaetz not going to be Attorney General. That's good. I think that's good. What's going to happen with RFK Jr.? I don't know. What's going to happen with Pete Hegseth? What's going to happen with Tulsi Gabbard? We will learn what kind of Republican Senate we will have by the conduct of the Republican Senate. What does Mike Johnson do with an extremely narrow House majority when Donald Trump says, I want you to call the House into recess so that when the Senate doesn't, I can declare them both in recess and stick my people in the cabinet without Senate approval? Does Mike Johnson want to go along with that? Does he have the votes to do that? Can he claim he doesn't have the votes? We don't know yet. But like, these are the tests. It's not a simple binary. Like, we're going to start to see what Republicans do and how much, even as they all publicly kind of genuflect and demonstrate fealty to Trump, hold the line, if not facing forward, kind of from the back.
So I want to talk about the Democratic Party more broadly as we kind of are in this postmortem period of the election. And I know that there's something for everybody to kind of confirm their own position. And so you'll have progressives, for example, who say that Kamala ran too far to the right, embraced the Liz Cheneys and Dick Cheneys of the world, the camo hats, if you enter my house, I'm going to shoot you, that whole thing. And for conservatives, they can, to the same token, be able to say, look, it was, Jared Golden ran well ahead of Kamala Harris in his district. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez ran well ahead of Kamala Harris in her district. And so there's something for everybody. Everybody can walk out of this and say, we're right, and you have to adopt our position. Democratic Party has to get more, skew a little bit more to the center, or the Democratic Party has to stop pussyfooting, flirting with conservatives and just go all out progressive. And so I'm curious where you stand on this, because I feel like there is a moment right here where there is some introspection, and we do have to kind of figure out some movements that we're not just doing the exact same thing, right? But which way we go kind of still remains up in the air, and it's just a cause for concern right now.
Yeah, I have sort of these two competing instincts, one of which is to be deeply suspicious of all of the people who are saying, I know what Democrats did wrong. It's the thing I've always said.
Right.
Bernie, who I have great respect and admiration for, puts out a statement saying Democrats abandoned the working class. Well, hold on a second, Bernie. Joe Biden is the most progressive president in our lifetimes. He, to his great credit, brought Elizabeth Warren in and Bernie in and progressives in. He put Lena Khan at the FTC. Just one small example of not just fighting for the middle class and the working class, but fighting for poor people. Right now, Republicans are talking about how they're going to pay for tax cuts for the rich. Right now, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
One proposal, just one little proposal. It's not going to get a lot of headlines. It's not fun. It's not trans prisoners becoming fabulous. It's Joe Biden, because of a bill Congress passed in a bipartisan way, he used his new authority to increase food stamps. Republicans were mad about this. They actually didn't realize that they had given him this authority. They felt that he had kind of misused his authority. But Joe Biden put in place the biggest increase to food stamps in the history of the program, the biggest permanent increase. Do you know how much the increase was?
How much?
It was $36 per person per month, about $432 per person per year. Not a lot of money. A lot of money if you are running out each month to try to buy nutritious food because your child has a disability or you have a disability and you can't work and you're trying to provide for your kids. Republicans want to stop the president from being able to do that, to pay for an extension of tax cuts for the wealthy. Joe Biden did not abandon the working class. You can say that we have a problem of too much money on the Democratic side in politics. You can say we have a brand problem. I'll agree, but I'm sorry, but it's just harder than that. It's just more nuanced than that. He did a lot of what progressives wanted him to do. Why did it matter? It's a more difficult question to answer. But no, you can't just go to your gut of the same critique you've had for a long time. By the way, same for the centrists, who every time we have an election result that is a big fucking loss, they're like, well, it's identity politics, or it's because of AOC, or it's because of the left. It's like, well, hold on a second. They used Kamala's words from 2020 against her, but she did campaign with Liz Cheney. She isn't out there saying Latinx. They're talking about, they're exploiting a ridiculous tiny issue to paint all Democrats as being radicals. That exists no matter what we say. That exists no matter what we do. And so I'm suspicious. Where I get to is I'm suspicious. But at the same time, I also want to start from the premise that maybe they're right. They're all right, right? Maybe we do have a problem, right? Like they ran $100 million of ads in, I think, Pennsylvania alone with, Kamala's for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. Now, there are people that want to make that issue about trans people. I think it's more just about Democrats are weird. They chose this one example, but Democrats are weird. Sorry, I'm just rambling about all this because I think there's so many things swirling around. Yeah. But where I land on all of this right now is I just start by saying, okay, I see kind of three big problems. One is there was a deep dissatisfaction with the current state of the economy, with inflation, with people not seeing the benefits of Joe Biden's policies or not believing that those policies were in place at all. Just fundamental frustration. That's specific to this election environment. Then I see a problem of just the information environment and reaching millions upon millions of people who are extremely distrustful of politicians and who just don't get that much political information. And then the third is I do think there is a Democratic brand problem, just a big problem, right? Like, why is it cool for Donald Trump to go on Rogan and to go on Theo Von and to do these podcasts, whereas on our side, people feel like, Kamala is political. Democrats are political. Like there is a establishment quality we have that they don't.
But do you think that's just Democrat? Do you think that's just Donald Trump? Like if it wasn't Trump, if it's like Tom Cotton, he's not going to have the same appeal, right? Is this just a situation where Trump is able to kind of play by different rules than the rest of his party? Or do you think that this is a Republican thing that they're all able to kind of fly above it and they'll be viewed as cool culturally speaking, whereas Democrats just aren't?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think some of it, yes, is unique to Trump, but I do think there's been some of like coattails with him, kind of like, JD Vance was able to do some of these shows too. And it's funny because like Trump is obviously a more natural fit in the sense that like he doesn't sound like a politician. He doesn't really know very much about politics.
Yeah.
So he fits really well in these environments.
Yeah.
But, I think sometimes on the left, we kind of have the wrong impression of what does well in those spaces, because I think there's just like, if people go and like, like someone like Fetterman, right? Somebody in cargo shorts, like someone who doesn't seem like
just like a very shallow interpretation of what would work.
But like, if you listen to any kind of these shows, like they'll have like intellectuals on, they'll have nerd types, it's not like just like a kind of like, I don't know, like kind of anti-intellectual bent, but there is something specific about like Marie Gluskamp Perez had this interview in the Times. She's also just on Pod Save America talking to John, and she said, I don't know what the kind of person that appeals where I'm from looks like exactly, but I know they're probably not a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. There's something about like Democrats, I've said this before, but like we're very front of the classroom. And we're just like front of the classroom kids. I'm a front of the classroom kid, but like we need more back of the classroom energy. And Donald Trump, back of the classroom energy. Barack Obama, back of the classroom energy. Like Al Gore, John Kerry, Michael Dukakis, front of the classroom. George W. Bush, back of the classroom. It's just like we need front of the classroom
policy
and minds and chops with back of the classroom energy.
Vibes. Yeah.
And we're just missing that right now. And I sometimes feel like I don't even hear it, right? Because like I think about the candidates that inspire me, and they know everything.
Yeah.
They're right. They just, I am like, I think like I need to think about it too. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but I just think we need to question our priors, be suspicious of anyone whose answer is the same, anyone who didn't really learn anything from the election, and while also just being open to the fact that whether it's Bernie, Seth Moulton, whoever it may be, like I'm going to listen.
You said something interesting there, and that was that you brought up the issue of Republicans exploiting to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars Kamala Harris's comments in 2019. And so, we know that in this campaign cycle, she didn't have a stance on gender reassignment surgeries among trans inmates in prison. And yet, if you asked anybody who consumed content out there in the broader, media sphere, that would be the one thing that they said. There was even polling that showed that among swing voters, the number one reason that people swung to Trump was because they thought she was more concerned with trans issues. Now, she didn't bring those up in this campaign, but I'm curious, in a media environment like we're in, where it doesn't even have to be something that exists in reality for them to exploit, how do you move forward where truth doesn't even matter? It's not even a basis for something that they're going to predicate the entire campaign on.
Well,
like the next candidate might have said something 10 years ago that might become the basis for what our 2028 nominee is going to have that campaign run based on.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I will say, let's like flip it around for a second, right? Why did that issue not apply to Trump in the same way? Which is, Trump had an extreme position on abortion. His justices led to the overturn of Roe v. Wade. He has a record, because he was so uninterested in the topic generally. He has a record of saying the kinds of things that pro-life activists know not to say. Like there must be some form of punishment for the woman. But Donald Trump made a point of trying to signal moderation. He did. He called himself the father of IVF. Obviously a stupid and ridiculous thing to say, but he came out and he did, I'm going to pay for IVF, right? He saw he had a problem because of what happened in Alabama. He's like, I'm going to pay for IVF.
So you're saying
he also says, I'm going to leave it up to the states. Anyone who says otherwise, I'm going to leave it up to the states. Doesn't take a position, fucks it up when he's asked about Florida, but over and over again, I'm going to leave it up to states. I'm going to leave it to states. He tries he just signals a different position. Kamala gets this dumb ACLU questionnaire focused on this very specific edge case, as if do we think that trans people in this country have it too good? we got to focus on this. Okay, but so that's what the ACLU is doing. Very helpful. Their campaign answers it. Not sure why, but decides they have to answer it. She gets asked about it. It's in her own voice. She gives an answer that then becomes the basis of these ads. How did she deal with it when she was asked about it? And I understand this, by the way. Like, you're in a 107-day campaign. You're trying to fight on all of these different fronts. You're seeing this ad being dropped on your head. It's not clear whether the best thing to do is to respond to it, address it, create a story around it, fight on another front. How do you push back? How do you deal with it? You know, by the way, that while a lot of people are seeing it, you hope and expect, and this is maybe I don't know. We don't know exactly. We need to see more data, but like maybe not that impactful, right? We're all talking about this without all the information.
Yeah.
But she's asked about it, and like she distances herself rhetorically. It was Donald Trump's position, but she doesn't signal that she has an actual different view. When she's asked about the position she took in 2020, she says, "My values haven't changed," which is a kind of and it's not really taking head on.
Yeah, it's just
these positions.
Parsing a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just political. It's just political.
Yeah.
And by the way, like I understand why the impulse was to do that. And after a campaign, every decision that a losing campaign makes is wrong, and every decision a winning campaign makes right. That may not have been the wrong thing to do, right? But so I really am like trying to I'm not being a Monday morning quarterback. I understand why that was how to address that and try to move on without creating a story around it. But I do think that Republicans are going to take things out of context. They're going to paint all Democrats with the worst version of what a college professor somewhere said. That's a huge problem. But that doesn't.
But we have to help ourselves.
We have to help ourselves. Yeah. We have agency too.
So Donald Trump had this issue that was going to be a major albatross around his neck, and at a bare minimum, he made an effort to, as bad faith as it may be, as disingenuous as it may have been, that he's the father of IVF. At least he pushed forward and tried to push back on it. Whereas we got politics speak from Kamala Harris on the issue of gender reassignment surgeries in prison, and so that didn't give people any reason to doubt what they were being told about her.
Right. I think that's right. And now, was that impactful? Did that matter? Is that what people are going to because they're more interested in it and it is more fun to talk about than just there was an inflation environment? There was a lot of misinformation about what Trump would actually do. There wasn't a lot of good information about why Kamala's policies were much better. The massive ad campaign could reach everyone except the group of voters we needed the most at the end. And by the way, also, this is a race that was swung in the three in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan by between
it's about 150,000 people.
Right, between 0.8% and 2% or less, 1.77%. So we're talking about a tiny fraction shifting, and so that's all my kind of caveats on that. But I do think, anyway, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some good lessons out of that. I think one, to not give too much relevance or weight to that specific issue, because we may very well have been in an economic environment where the best candidate on God's green earth for the Democrats wouldn't have won, because we've seen that in the global environment this year where no incumbents gained seats or won their races.
Right. Well, it's also Kamala started out way behind because Joe Biden was going to get fucking obliterated, and she fights back to basically a tie in the three most critical states. She loses. That's a shame. Wish we'd have won. But that campaign had a big effect. Where people were exposed to Kamala and Trump the most, Kamala did better. That speaks to the fact that what she was doing was working. And Donald Trump was a fucking mess out there, right? So in order for Democrats, I mean, this speaks to, I think, to the larger problem where this is why it's everybody's so confident or they have all these opinions. It's hold on a second. Donald Trump manifestly unfit. Blunting. Part of the reason I allowed myself, even though for months I was so convinced it was tied and that we were underdogs, I believed, of course, that when Joe Biden was going to be the nominee. That's why I was one of the people who was so agitated for having the debate about making the change. But I believed we were underdogs because of this international environment that was so hard for incumbents, but I allowed myself to believe we were going to win right at the very end, or at least that I felt like I'd rather be us than them. I never was sure, of course.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump was fucking it up.
Right.
He was, the Madison Square Garden was a missed opportunity. I don't know now in hindsight if that one joke mattered as much as people wanted to hope it did, but he was a mess. He was rambling. His events were bad. People were dissuspected inside of the Trump organization, and Kamala was doing everything that she could to win. She was fighting to win. She was listening to the best advice. She was on message where she had to be on message. And then we look back and it's like, well, she fucked up on The View, so oops.
Yeah.
And so Republicans can blunder across the country and ramble for hours on end, but Democrats have to get every single thing right. What does that say about us? What does that say? It shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah.
How is our brand so tarnished that Democrats have to get every single thing right to win? But Trump can be a mess for months. And now he's going to be the president putting a bunch of fucking goons and maniacs in the cabinet. Like, that to me is like the question. And like Donald Trump, he's willing to go to New York and claim, I'm going to win New York. Now that's stupid.
Yeah.
Right? But at least he can imagine building a bigger majority. Democrats should be thinking about why are we in a 50-50 country? We believe our policies are better. We believe the vast majority of people will be better served by Democratic policies, especially at the national level. What does a 55-45 country look like? What does a 60-40 country look like? How do we go out and get it?
Yeah.
So like, yes, we're talking about 1 or 2 points, and all of a sudden Kamala's campaign is the greatest thing to ever happen.
Right.
And Donald
We
Trump
did everything correct. Yeah.
Right. But in this moment, I still think it's worth saying, okay, without grand sweeping conclusions or confirming our priors, let's use this as a moment to reimagine our politics in such a way that we can see ourselves winning, not just in New York and California and in 10% of counties that are more cosmopolitan and urban, but winning everywhere with the people who deserve leaders that don't just like perform working class theatrics, but actually are advocating for them every day.
You'd mentioned the ACLU questionnaire, and that's a situation where you have these edge cases that these Democratic politicians go on record to basically show that they're going to succeed in whatever purity test is imposed by the group that represents a certain special interest group, right? Faction of people. Do you think that there is some acknowledgement that perhaps that's not helpful, and in fact, by putting yourself on record in these edge case scenarios, that if those become a liability, you're actually doing those same groups that you purport to want to help more harm than good by virtue of giving the other side ammo to attack you on?
So I think groups, and people say group, I think nonprofit organizations that have a view about how to build a better world should fight for that world as hard as they can with Republicans and Democrats. They should be advocating for what they believe are the best policies. Do I think politics should impact how they do that? Of course. But I have less of an issue. I mean, I have some issue with the ACLU making that part of their questionnaire. I think it speaks to like, hold on a second, dude, like, what's your mission here exactly? Yeah. Like, it's confusing. But that's a very kind of easy one. Everyone enjoys talking about that one, which tells us there's a problem, right? Why are we focusing on this? Myself included. Like, it's an easy one to kind of be like, hey, wait a second. That's harder. There's harder politics.
Yeah.
I do think it's more about where did Democrats push back and where do they not? I think that there was a moment in 2020 where Democrats weren't willing to push back, or they had become enamored of certain notions that were not based in either the best policy or the best politics. I think that's more true on immigration. I think that there was a, frankly, like pretty kind of inherently racist idea that the way you appeal to Latino American citizens is by embracing less stringent border policies. I don't know what that was based on. It certainly wasn't based on polling. It was based on what a few advocates were suggesting was better policy.
Yeah.
But all in all, I think it's more about like, look at someone like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has, over decades of being in politics, built up so much trust, right? Just even Joe Rogan, right? When Joe Rogan endorsed him in whatever primary that was, he said, this is a guy that's been saying the same thing for decades.
Yeah.
And so what does that consistency, that ideology, that brand get you? It gives you the space to be a full-throated backer of Joe Biden. It gives you the space to have harder conversations about when the politics aren't on your side and why you have to fight for one thing and not another. And I think one of the problems we have is there aren't enough leading Democrats who have that kind of space and trust. When Barack Obama was talking about immigration in 2008, 2012, when he was governing, he was able to say, we are a nation of laws and we are a nation of immigrants. We need to have generous policies for people that have been in this country, but we also have to enforce our laws. And if you came in here illegally, you got to go to the back of the line. You got to pay taxes, whatever it was, whatever the exact language was. But he felt like he had the political space to do that. And I think what we've had, especially in the primaries, are Democrats who didn't have the either political judgment or political space to do that. And that's a huge problem because I think you see this all over the place, right? I think this is like kind of core to what we're talking about here, right? Like, so you have this specific anti-establishment moment around inflation and the economy, fine. But there's a connection between why Democrats don't feel welcome or comfortable in some of these less political spaces and the Democratic brand being kind of political and establishment.
Yeah.
And I am less interested in how we fight on any one or two of these issues and more with where is the person who can build up a reservoir of trust with a broad range of Democratic voters in order to have difficult conversations.
I think that it's good to have, like, look, the one thing that I will say to the broader party, well, most of the broader party's credit, is that there does seem to be a moment of introspection where people are open. You know, you have a few people who are saying, I was right all along, but I think generally people recognize that there's a problem. Even if this election may very well have been a referendum on the economic environment, and if we put, someone with Barack Obama's charm and Elizabeth Warren's policy chops and Pete Buttigieg's ability to, like, combat Republicans, like, even if we had scientifically engineered the best candidate on earth, we may very well have lost. But I don't think there's any shame or weakness in figuring out what we can do in this moment where it doesn't really matter right now if we have some introspection and try and figure out a better way to move forward, even if again, everything we did was correct and it was just a referendum on the economic environment more broadly. Yeah. So, Lovett, where can we see more from you?
Everybody, you go to Pod Save America, go to Love It or Leave It, subscribe on the YouTube, please.
It's important right now, especially in terms of, like, building out this left of center, this progressive media ecosystem. So I'll put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Lovett, thanks for taking the time today.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you too.